Brothers and sisters, what if I told you that right now, as you watch this video, two African nations are making moves that have the Western establishment sweating bullets? What if I told you that Uganda and Burkina Faso are quietly orchestrating the most significant challenge to centuries of colonial exploitation in our lifetime? This isn't hyperbole. This is happening right now, and the mainstream media doesn't want you to know about it. While the world focuses on distractions, Uganda just launched its first ever fully Ugandan-owned gold refinery, and Captain Ibrahim Traoré continues his gold revolution in Burkina Faso. These aren't just business ventures, they're declarations of economic war against neo-colonialism. Today we're diving deep into how these two nations are rewriting the playbook on African resource control, why the West is terrified, and what this means for the entire continent. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will change how you see Africa's future forever. Let's start with what just happened in Uganda. On July 29, 2025, Minister of Energy and Mineral Development Dr. Ruth Nankabirwa Sentamu officially commissioned the Euro Gold Refinery along Kadigo Road in Kamwokya, describing it as the first facility officially recognized by the government. Now, you might think, what's the big deal about another refinery? Let me tell you why this is earth-shattering. For decades, Uganda has been sitting on one of the world's largest gold reserves. President Museveni revealed in 2022 that Uganda holds 31 million metric tons of gold deposits, with 320,000 metric tons of extractable pure gold valued at $12.8 trillion. Let that sink in for a moment. $12.8 trillion. That's enough wealth to transform not just Uganda, but the entire East African region. But here's the kicker. Until now, almost all of this gold was being exported raw, unprocessed, with the real value addition happening in Western refineries. The profits? They went to London, Toronto, Sydney. Anywhere but Uganda. The Euro Gold Refinery changes this equation fundamentally. The facility is designed to process gold to an internationally recognized purity of 99.9%, meaning Uganda can now compete directly with established Western refineries. But this isn't just about technical capability, it's about economic sovereignty. Gold has emerged as Uganda's top export, accounting for 37% of export revenue in the 12 months leading up to February 2025, with exports reaching $3.09 billion by June 2024, contributing nearly 50% of Uganda's non-coffee export earnings. Think about the mathematics here. If Uganda can refine locally instead of exporting raw gold, the value multiplication is enormous. Raw gold might sell for $2,000 per ounce, but refined, certified gold commands premium prices. More importantly, all the jobs in processing, quality control, logistics, and related services stay in Uganda. The refinery is already creating ripple effects. Local artisanal miners, who have been exploited by middlemen and foreign buyers for generations, now have a credible, transparent marketplace. No more selling their gold at pittance prices to dubious dealers. No more watching their sweat and labor enrich foreign corporations while their communities remain in poverty. Dr. Nankabirwa emphasized workforce development, training young Ugandans as skilled technicians, engineers, and managers. This isn't just about processing gold, it's about building human capital that will serve Uganda for generations. But let's be honest about the challenges. Uganda's gold sector has been bleeding money through corruption and fraud. The 2024 Auditor General's report exposed a staggering reality. $3.04 billion in illegal gold exports conducted without permits, in flagrant violation of national laws. This wasn't just bureaucratic oversight, this was systematic looting involving security officers, corrupt officials, and foreign syndicates. In 2025, police investigations led by Deputy Director Beata Chilimo uncovered sophisticated gold scams targeting foreign investors, with 24 security officers implicated in networks that thrived on deceit and greed. Here's what makes this particularly tragic. While billions were being stolen, communities near gold mines lacked basic amenities, clean water, electricity, schools, healthcare. The wealth was literally under their feet, but flowing into the pockets of corrupt officials and foreign conspirators. The Euro Gold Refinery represents Uganda's response to this crisis. By centralizing and formalizing gold processing, the government can better monitor the sector, prevent smuggling, and ensure that the wealth actually benefits Ugandans. This connects to President Museveni's broader vision for value addition, cemented in the 2021 Mining and Minerals Bill, which bans the export of unprocessed minerals. The message is clear. Uganda will no longer be content to export raw materials and watch others capture the real value. Now let's turn to Burkina Faso, where Captain Ibrahim Traoré has been implementing perhaps the most radical anti-neocolonial economic program in Africa today. At just 34 years old when he took power in September 2022, Traoré has shown the world what happens when a leader prioritizes his people over Western approval. In November 2023, President Traoré laid the foundation stone for a national gold refinery with an annual refining capacity of 150 tons. But this was just the beginning of his gold revolution. Traoré has nationalized 2 gold mines and stopped exporting unrefined gold to Europe, instead inaugurating a national gold refinery expected to process 150 tons annually. These weren't abstract policy decisions. They were direct challenges to the Western corporations that had been extracting Burkina Faso's wealth for decades. Before Traoré, foreign companies, particularly British, Canadian, and Australian multinationals like Endeavour Mining, controlled Burkina Faso's gold sector. Gold makes up 80% of Burkina Faso's export earnings, yet the country ranked 185th out of 193 on the Human Development Index. The wealth was there, glistening in the soil, but it never reached the people. Traoré's approach has been systematic and uncompromising. Through the new mining code adopted in July 2024, he fundamentally restructured ownership arrangements by establishing state shareholding interests, ranging from 15–30% in mining operations. In February 2024, Traoré ordered the suspension of export permits for small-scale private gold production, aimed at tackling illicit trade and cleaning up the artisanal gold sector. The results speak for themselves. The refinery is set to create 100 new jobs and 5,000 indirect jobs, producing roughly 400 kilos of gold daily. More importantly, the profits from nationalized mines and the refinery are being channeled into sectors that had been starved for decades: defense, infrastructure, healthcare, education, and agriculture. To understand why Uganda's refinery and Traoré's policies are so significant, we need to understand the system they're challenging. For centuries, the West has maintained economic control over Africa through a sophisticated extraction mechanism that makes traditional colonialism look primitive. Here's how it works. Western corporations, backed by their governments, secure mining contracts that give them 80–90% of the profits, while African nations get scraps. In many cases, African governments hold mere 10% equity shares in mines, extracting their own resources. Take the Democratic Republic of Congo. It holds 70% of the world's cobalt, essential for every smartphone and electric vehicle battery. Yet its people live on less than $2 a day. Why? Because the system is designed to extract raw materials at minimal cost and add value elsewhere. The CFA franc, used by 14 African countries including Burkina Faso until Traoré's push to abandon it, exemplifies this neo-colonial control. Pegged to the euro and managed by France, it ensures African economies remain dependent, and their wealth flows to Paris. Corrupt African leaders have been the West's enablers, signing deals that sell out their people for personal gain. They stash billions in Swiss banks, buy mansions in European capitals, and live lavishly while their citizens lack basic services. The World Bank and IMF, with their structural adjustment programs, trap African nations in debt cycles, forcing them to privatize resources, cut social spending, and open markets to Western corporations. It's a system designed to keep Africa perpetually dependent, always a market, never a competitor. The early results from both countries show what's possible when African leaders prioritize their people over Western approval. In Burkina Faso, despite facing a jihadist insurgency partly triggered by Western interventions like NATO's 2011 destruction of Libya, Traoré's resource nationalism is showing dividends. Child health is improving, with vaccination rates rising and malnutrition declining. Agricultural production is surging, with millet, sorghum, and cotton yields increasing. GDP growth is projected at significant rates, with the potential to lift millions out of poverty. Traoré's rejection of IMF and World Bank loans, with their suffocating conditionalities, is a masterstroke of sovereignty. Instead of borrowing from institutions that would force him to privatize resources and open markets to foreign corporations, he's funding development with Burkina Faso's own gold wealth. For Uganda, the potential is even more staggering given the scale of its gold reserves. If corruption can be controlled and the wealth channeled into development, Uganda could become a regional economic powerhouse. Imagine a Uganda where every child has access to quality education, where hospitals are equipped with cutting-edge technology, where roads connect rural farmers to urban markets, and where industries employ millions. The multiplier effects are enormous. Local gold refining creates jobs not just in processing, but in logistics, quality control, security, and related services. It builds technical expertise that can be applied to other sectors. It generates tax revenues that can fund infrastructure, education, and healthcare, and, most importantly, it breaks the dependency cycle. Instead of exporting raw materials and importing finished goods, These countries are building the capacity to add value locally, keeping profits at home, and creating sustainable employment for their youth. What Uganda and Burkina Faso are doing represents more than individual success stories. They're providing a blueprint for continental liberation. Africa controls the world's mineral wealth. 70% of global cobalt, vast reserves of gold, lithium, uranium, oil, diamonds, and rare earth elements. If every African nation followed this path of resource nationalism and value addition, the continent would be transformed within a generation. Employment would skyrocket as young Africans find meaningful work in mining, manufacturing, technology, and agriculture. Infrastructure would modernize rapidly, with high-speed railways linking capitals, modern ports facilitating trade, and reliable power grids lighting up homes and businesses. More fundamentally, Africa would control global supply chains instead of being relegated to raw material supplier. The West, which relies on African cobalt for batteries, gold for wealth storage, lithium for technology, and uranium for energy, would have to engage Africa as equals rather than subordinates. Imagine a world where European and American corporations come to Africa, not to extract, but to negotiate fair partnerships. Where African leaders set the terms of engagement rather than accepting whatever crumbs are offered. Where African youth see opportunities at home rather than risking their lives to reach European shores. This is the future that Uganda's Euro Gold refinery and Traore's gold revolution are pointing toward. An Africa that controls its destiny, channels its wealth into development, and stands as an equal among nations. But let's be realistic about the challenges. The West won't surrender its neo-colonial advantages without a fight. We've already seen how they respond to African leaders who challenge the system. Sanctions, media campaigns, support for opposition movements, and in extreme cases, military interventions. Corruption remains a critical vulnerability. Uganda's experience with $3.4 billion in illegal gold exports shows how easily progress can be undermined by corrupt officials working with foreign conspirators. The systems being put in place, centralized processing, strict monitoring, transparent accounting, are essential, but they require constant vigilance. International pressure is intensifying. Western governments and their corporate allies will use every tool at their disposal, economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, media campaigns, to discourage other African nations from following the Uganda-Burkina Faso model. There's also the challenge of building technical capacity. Gold refining requires skilled technicians, quality control experts, and sophisticated equipment. Both countries are investing in training, but building world-class expertise takes time. Security remains a concern, particularly in the Sahel region where jihadist groups, often armed with weapons from Western interventions like the Libya destruction, pose ongoing threats. Traoré has been using gold revenues to strengthen Burkina Faso's military capacity, but the security situation remains challenging. The Western response to these developments reveals just how threatening they find African resource nationalism. When Captain Traoré nationalizes mines and builds refineries, Western media portrays him as authoritarian. When he rejects IMF loans, they question his economic competence. When he uses gold revenues to fight jihadists, they accuse him of militarization. General Michael Langley, head of U.S. Africa Command, had the audacity to accuse Traoré of using Burkina Faso's gold to protect his regime rather than benefit the people. A claim so hypocritical, it's almost laughable. The U.S. has been using African resources to benefit American corporations for decades, often propping up dictators who serve Western interests. The hypocrisy is glaring. The same Western governments that lecture Africa on democracy and human rights have been supporting corrupt leaders who sell out their people's resources. The same institutions that offer aid with one hand have been facilitating resource extraction with the other. Their panic is understandable. If the Uganda-Burkina Faso model spreads across Africa, the entire neo-colonial system collapses. Western corporations lose their privileged access to cheap raw materials. Western economies lose their unfair advantages built on centuries of extraction. Most importantly, Africa emerges as a competitor rather than a subordinate, fundamentally altering global power dynamics. Captain Traoré's approach draws clear inspiration from Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader who was assassinated in 1987 for daring to challenge Western imperialism. Sankara showed what was possible when an African leader put his people first. In just 4 years, he increased literacy rates, reduced infant mortality, expanded vaccination programs, and promoted food self-sufficiency. Sankara was killed because he represented an existential threat to the neo-colonial order. His vision of a self-reliant, prosperous Africa terrified Western powers who profited from African dependency. Traoré is walking in Sankara's footsteps, but with crucial advantages. The global context has changed. China's rise provides alternative partnerships. Social media enables direct communication with African populations, and Pan-African consciousness is stronger than ever. Uganda's journey, while different in approach, shares the same fundamental goal: ensuring that African wealth serves African development. President Museveni's long-term vision of value addition, implemented through initiatives like the Euro Gold refinery, represents a pragmatic path toward the same destination Sankara envisioned. Both Uganda and Burkina Faso have extremely young populations, over 60% under 25 years old. This demographic reality makes resource nationalism not just economically sensible, but essential for social stability. Young Africans are more educated, more connected, and more aware of global inequalities than any previous generation. They see the contradiction between sitting on vast mineral wealth while lacking opportunities. They understand that their parents' generation was cheated, and they're demanding better. The gold refineries in both countries represent hope for these young people. Instead of risking their lives to reach Europe or accepting perpetual underemployment, they can build careers in growing industries at home. The technical training programs associated with the refineries are particularly crucial. Young Ugandans and Burkinabe are learning skills in metallurgy, quality control, equipment maintenance, and industrial management that will serve them throughout their careers and can be applied to other sectors. This is how sustainable development happens, not through aid dependence or raw material exports, but through building human capital and industrial capacity that creates opportunities for each generation. The success of Uganda's Euro Gold refinery and Burkina Faso's nationalization program is being closely watched across Africa. Ghana, which has its own significant gold reserves, is already discussing similar value addition initiatives. Mali and Guinea, both gold-rich nations, are reassessing their relationships with foreign mining companies. The Democratic Republic of Congo, despite its political challenges, has begun demanding higher stakes in cobalt mining operations. Zambia is renegotiating copper contracts. Even Nigeria, with its oil wealth, is exploring how to capture more value from its resources. This ripple effect is exactly what the West fears most: a continental awakening where African nations collectively demand fair value for their resources. The potential for coordinated action, perhaps through enhanced African Union mechanisms or regional economic communities, could fundamentally shift global economic dynamics. The recent expansion of BRICS to include several African nations provides additional leverage. As alternative economic partnerships emerge, African countries have more options and less dependence on traditional Western institutions. Both refineries represent significant technological achievements for their countries. The Euro Gold refinery's ability to produce 99.9% pure gold puts Uganda in direct competition with established Western facilities. Burkina Faso's refinery, processing 150 tons annually and producing 400 kilos daily, demonstrates serious industrial capacity. But the real innovation is in the business models. By maintaining majority ownership and control, both countries ensure that the knowledge transfer is genuine and permanent. They're not just hosting foreign operations, they're building indigenous capacity. The emphasis on training local technicians and engineers creates multiplier effects. These skilled workers can eventually start their own companies, consult for other African nations, or develop improved processes and technologies. This approach to technology transfer represents a stark contrast to traditional foreign investment models, where African countries provided raw materials and labor, while all the technical expertise remained with foreign corporations. Both countries are also addressing the environmental and social impacts of mining, issues that were largely ignored when foreign corporations controlled the sectors. Local ownership means local accountability. When profits stay in the country, there's stronger incentive to ensure that mining communities benefit from the wealth extraction. When governments control the process, they're more responsive to citizen concerns about environmental protection. The artisanal mining sector, which employs millions across Africa but has often been exploited by foreign buyers, is being formalized and integrated into national development strategies. This creates better working conditions, fair prices, and opportunities for small-scale miners to improve their operations. Environmental standards are being enforced more rigorously when the beneficiaries of the wealth are also the people who live with the environmental consequences. What we're witnessing in Uganda and Burkina Faso is the beginning of Africa's true independence, not just political, but economic. For the first time since colonial occupation, African nations are demonstrating that they can control their resources, add value locally, and channel wealth into genuine development. The numbers are staggering when we consider the continental potential. Africa holds 30% of global mineral reserves, 60% of arable land, and the world's youngest population. If these resources were developed with African interests prioritized, the continent could become the world's fastest-growing economic region within 2 decades. The gold refineries are just the beginning. The same principles can be applied to cobalt processing in Congo, lithium beneficiation in Zimbabwe, uranium enrichment in Niger, and oil refining across West Africa. Imagine an Africa where every country processes its own resources, where intra-African trade flourishes because nations are producing finished goods, rather than competing to export raw materials, where young Africans see opportunities at home, rather than abroad. This is the vision that Uganda and Burkina Faso are making reality, one refined ounce at a time. Brothers and sisters, what you've witnessed in this analysis is nothing short of historic. Uganda's Euro Gold Refinery and Captain Traoré's gold revolution in Burkina Faso represent the dawn of Africa's economic renaissance. These aren't just success stories from 2 countries. They're blueprints for continental liberation. They prove that African nations can break free from neo-colonial dependency, control their resources, and channel their wealth into genuine development. The West's centuries of extraction and exploitation are finally being challenged by leaders who put their people first. The corrupt officials who sold out their nations for personal gain are being exposed and sidelined. The foreign corporations that grew fat on African resources are losing their monopolies. But this revolution requires all of us. It requires African citizens to support leaders who prioritize development over Western approval. It requires young Africans to build the skills needed for industrial development. It requires the diaspora to invest in and support African enterprises rather than only Western ones. Most importantly, it requires us to change the narrative. Instead of accepting that Africa is destined to be poor despite its wealth, we must demand and expect prosperity. Instead of celebrating African leaders who are praised by Western media, we must support those who deliver results for African people. The gold flowing through Uganda's refinery and Burkina Faso's processing facilities represents more than mineral wealth. It represents hope, dignity, and the promise of a continent finally claiming its birthright. The revolution is underway. The question is, will you be part of it? If this analysis opened your eyes to what's really happening in Africa, hit that like button. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand how Uganda and Burkina Faso are changing the game. Subscribe and ring the notification bell because the mainstream media won't tell you these stories, but we will. And most importantly, let me know in the comments, what other African success stories do you want us to cover? What questions do you have about resource nationalism and economic sovereignty? Your engagement helps us reach more people with these crucial truths. The golden age of Africa is beginning. Let's make sure the world knows about it.